Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Taylor, and welcome to our Teach Western Mass Resume Informational. A little bit about Teach Western Mass to start. So, Teach Western Mass is located here in Springfield, Massachusetts, and we've been working hard to make sure that there is an excellent educator in every classroom here in Western Mass. We represent 30 schools serving over 11,000 students here in the area, and we're looking for teachers who have three main traits along with that passion to serve students. So to start off, we want teachers who are committed, teachers who believe that all families, regardless of where they live or how much money they earn, have the right to an excellent education and a bright future for them and their children. We also want teachers who are collaborative, teachers who work together to ensure that everyone in the building is operating at their best, no matter what their role is in a school. And then finally, we want teachers who are constantly learning, teachers who welcome opportunities to practice and receive feedback, and then use that feedback to grow in the classroom as educators for the benefit of their students. A little bit about myself. My name, as I said, is Michael Taylor, and I'm the recruitment manager here with Teach Western Mass. And so I began my career in Texas, going to college out there and getting a feel for education as something that I might want to pursue in more detail down the road. And so I moved to Philadelphia and began teaching. I taught middle school for 10 years in Philadelphia. And then before I came out to Western Mass, I did some educational policy work as well to get an idea of the different things that affect education outside of what goes on in a school setting. I'm here in Western Mass now and really appreciate having some space compared to that city life. And so I'm happy to be here with you talking tonight about what's going on in terms of resumes and building up your skill set for that. My email address is here, Michael at Teach Western Mass, and I'll remind you again at the end about that and understand that this information is also shared on the document that you can access at any time as well. So, what are we here for? Today, our main goal is to take a look at the purpose and importance of crafting and sharing a strong resume. We want to review the components of a strong resume, both the formatting and the structure, identify education and teaching role specific resume content, and then schedule some next steps so you can take a look at what the hiring process might look like down the road from here. So, why do any of this? Your resume is your introduction. It's a way for hiring teams and school leaders and others to get to know you in a short amount of time. And by a short amount of time, it takes 30 seconds or less for somebody looking at a resume to decide whether or not that person is somebody they want to move forward in the hiring process. So you want to make sure that you stand out in the crowd from all the other resumes that someone might take a look at. And then finally, it's the standard. If you are looking for an opportunity and there's no resume component involved, that should be a flag to you. And that's a sign, especially in an educational setting, that there might not be those quality checks for people that are in front of children that you would want from your own family to have from somebody in front of them. So just keep that in mind that it's a pretty standard part of every employment process, and it is something that's going to be expected of you down the road as you move forward in your career. So here's an area where there is some room for debate. When we take a look at a resume, not everyone agrees that a resume should have X component or Y component, but there are some standard components that most people agree on. And so I have also given some other options as to what a resume could or should look like in the information that's at the very end of the document, and you'll be able to take a look at that. But just know that these are some standard things that I've seen in my review of thousands of resumes over the years. So taking a look at contact information, that's the very top part, and that's letting folks know who you are and a little bit about yourself in terms of websites and things like that. Your professional summary and objective is a quick snapshot of either why you want the job or who you are and why you would be a good fit for a particular job. Your educational history is pretty self-explanatory. What degrees and attainment have you had in that realm? And then your employment history, same. What jobs have you done specifically in the world of education, but in general as well? And then additional skills and information are things that help an employer know who you are outside of that information that's just your education and your employment. And we'll go into more detail about all of these as we go along. Starting off with our contact information. So if you take a look at contact information, we want to make sure that folks have the information they need to, one, get in touch with you after they see your resume, but two, also get a sense for any particular things that would be good to know. So for example, your name, your email, your phone number, contact information right there, and then additionally your website. If you have a LinkedIn, a portfolio website, an art website, something along those lines that helps an employer know a little bit more about you and that they can see without needing to just read it on your resume. One thing that's changed over time is that addresses are not always a requirement for the contact information portion of your resume. That's because there have been some privacy concerns, things that have gone on with that. And so it's great if you want to put that on there. Sometimes it helps an employer know that you're a local, but it isn't required. And so keep that in mind. Your email should be work appropriate. So that means your first name, your last name, gmail.com. Gmail is pretty much the standard nowadays. Something compared to you're too hot for you at AOL.com. If you're using an AOL, a Hotmail, something along those lines, it shows that you are a little bit behind the times in terms of what folks are using as the standard. Again, Gmail. And then the too hot for you is not the professional look that you want somebody to get from you in terms of whether or not you are a candidate for that particular position. So make sure that it's as work appropriate as possible. And if you're not sure, ask somebody. An example here is Maya Stuckey. She has her email address, her phone number, and then her LinkedIn with information about how to get that information from her on that LinkedIn. Your summary and objective. This should explain why you're applying or why you would be a good fit for the role. Don't use the same summary for every job that you apply to. That means that you're tailoring your resume specifically to the employer and letting them know what specifically about you is good for that specific role. It should be about 1 to 2 sentences, 3 at the very most, but this isn't a paragraph about your life. This is you targeting why this is a good fit for you or why you are a good fit for them. An example here is the objective. You can see there to obtain an entry-level position. And then on the bottom is the summary statement version where it lists a little bit about who they are and why they'd be a good fit. Education. So because this is an education related resume, you want to make sure you're putting things that are education related at the forefront of what people are looking at. So that means your teaching licenses and certifications, if you have them, front and center. They don't have to be, but it's a good sign for folks who are looking to say, oh, this person has them. Okay, that means I should take a closer look at them. If you don't have them, you want to start with your most recent degree attainment and put that on there. Oftentimes that's the highest degree attainment as well, but not always. You want to make sure you're not listing any GPA under 3.5. Again, some people might say that 3.0 and above is fine. If that's what you feel, go for it. I say 3.5 because you don't want your GPA to be something that disqualifies you, even if it's a good GPA. And there's nothing wrong with the 3.25 GPA. But if you don't want somebody to take a second guess as to whether or not you should move on based on something like that, you can explain who you are in more detail in an interview. Don't let that GPA be something that puts you in a maybe or a no pile. And then skip high school information. Unless there's something dramatic or special about your high school experience, they don't need to know that. It's something that they're more focused on what you've done in college and beyond, so make sure that you list that on there. An example, certification for the Red Cross, and then education is listed here. So that's an example of what an education section might look like. For employment, you want to lead with your recent most relevant teaching experience first. And so that means if you have that, please put it down because it, as again, is an education resume. You want people to know who you are as an educator and whatever information you have about that. Say that you don't have any teaching experience. Well, then you want to go with the most recent, most relevant non-teaching experiences in order. And so to do so, you want to make sure you're reviewing action verbs and transferable skills you might have and fit those into the accomplishments and not duties that you've done in a particular role. So that means instead of saying wrote lesson plans, you would do something like wrote lesson plan or constructed lesson plans used as exemplars for the entire school. Show what you've done and accomplished that's brought benefit to your organization or to your school, not something that you did because it was your job. One way to look at it, and then there are some, again, additional resources for that at the end of this document. An example of an employment section leads with the recent teaching experience and then goes on to their practica there. And then on the bottom, it has other relevant experience. And the reason why it is good to make sure you're thinking about what you're putting on here. There are lots of transferable skills for somebody, for example, like a laboratory aide on here, who's worked in a science lab and understands structure and formatting and safety that would be very transferable to a school setting. So consider, no matter what your other roles are, what those transferable skills are and how you can frame those in a way that supports students and a job that you're looking for. So for other info, this is an area with some wiggle room as well. One thing that I always tell folks is that if you have language proficiency outside of English, make sure you list it and be upfront and honest about what it is. If you are, intermediate, if you're advanced, if you're fluent in writing but not in speaking or vice versa, say so. Definitely be honest because you might be called on it, but be upfront because there are lots of people out there who don't list this. And then when it gets found out, they're like, oh, if we'd have known that, we'd have hired you immediately. So make sure you're listing those and be upfront and honest as possible with those. Honors, awards, and fellowships. These are things that can sometimes pad out a resume, but also are important if there are things that represent you and show what you've accomplished over time, especially if they're nationally recognized or specifically granted from either your employer or a school. Make sure that those are listed and make sure that you're being considerate about how much space they take up in your resume. In lieu of additional employment experience, one thing that's sometimes helpful is adding volunteer experience. So making sure that you're keeping in mind what you've done and what ways you contributed to the community and how that might reflect in terms of an employment opportunity that you're applying for on a resume. Non-teaching certifications and also relevant skills, technical or otherwise, including office suites, IT skills, things that might be relevant in terms of CPR, et cetera, for a school setting. An example, languages, Spanish Advanced is listed here, volunteer experience, and then other organizations that they're a member of. As a nurse, that would be helpful if you're going to a school setting, knowing first aid, etc. And then some reminders about resumes in general. These are just my personal tips for folks taking a look at their resume before they send it off. First thing, revise, revise, revise. Please take a look. Make sure you're tailoring your resume to whatever organization or school you're trying to apply for. That means making sure your resume is as unique to whatever it's being sent out as possible and not using one standard resume for everything. When you're taking a look at your resume, take 5 seconds. Ask yourself, is it neat? Is it consistent? And if not, what needs to be done to change it? Sometimes people use templates to try to make their resumes, and that's great for the first one, but if you're trying to revise or tailor it to a particular organization, it can make it difficult because some of that adjustment might not work perfectly. So please keep that in mind and double check to make sure everything looks perfect. And by perfect, you get there by proofreading, proofreading, and proofreading. Take a look, 5 seconds, 30 seconds, put it down. Take a look an hour later, and then take a look at it the next day. And then have a second opinion, another set of eyes to take a look at it and give you some advice on it as well. You want it to be as pristine, concise, and clean as possible because those are the ones that get a second look. And you want to represent yourself well, especially if you're going to be an educator. Keep it to 1 page. Unless you have an extensive work career, 5 years plus, you want to make sure that you are keeping your resume clean, tight, and concise by putting that information on 1 page. You don't want a little bit spilling over to a second page. If you have a great deal of information to add, you have a long career, especially in education, add that information on there. But the more you add, the more it turns into a CV. And that's something that you don't really want to have somebody flipping through pages on a resume, front and back tops, because otherwise, again, it goes into a maybe or a no pile at best. And then finally, again, revise, revise, revise. You can't revise your resume too much. There is a time when you need to send it off, but please make sure that you're doing your best to make sure the resume is one that represents you to the best possible amount and that you are happy with it. And then somebody taking a look at it will say, this is a good resume, and take a look at it again. So some next steps in terms of what to do from here. First off, take a look at your resume if you have one on hand. If you haven't created one yet, go ahead and start creating it and then revise it. Take a close look and get a second or third opinion on it. Attend the Teach Western Mass Hiring Fair. So on March 2nd, we have our 3rd annual Teach Western Mass Hiring Fair from 3 to 4 p.m. And so we want you to make sure that you're attending that to get an opportunity to be in front of our 30 partner schools, meeting with school leaders and hiring teams. And so more information on that can be found at teachwesternmass.com/RSVP. Keep at it. Apply early. There's some information on our website now already about open positions. Schools are posting some more. And then starting in the beginning of February, we'll have a full slate of what schools are ready to post in terms of openings. So start applying as soon as possible. Early bird gets the worm and all that. And so you want to make sure that if you are out there and getting your foot in the door early, you'll be some of the first that get talked to in terms of interviews and next steps. And then thank yous and follow-ups. Once you've made that initial outreach, make sure that you're thanking folks if you have an interview or a conversation, and then follow-ups. Keep up with making sure that if they have your information, that they're letting you know what's going on. Don't ask them every single day. Once a week, if you haven't heard anything from them, maybe every 2 weeks, depending on the process, is fine, but make sure that you're keeping up with that. And then finally, like, follow, share. This is a video. It's not quite YouTube, but take a look at us at Teach Western Mass MA on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. One, to get a sense for what's going on with Teach Western Mass and some of these other opportunities that I've discussed here. And then also to be part of a community of like-minded people who are in the area looking for educational opportunities or invested in the educational opportunities that are already taking place here in Western Mass. And so thank you for your time this evening. This is a really great way for you to boost up your resume, but also a great way for us to get to know you better. So please feel free to send me an email at teachwesternmass.com if you have questions about your resume or just the employment landscape in general out here. Our website is teachwesternmass.com. Our current openings page on our website lists openings from our partner schools, and then our residency page is our residency program for those who are looking for licensure in ESL, special education, or middle school math. So I didn't come up with every single image on here, and here are some information that might be helpful in terms of learning some more about those action verbs, transferable skills, or examples of resumes. And this document is available to you for examination. And if you have more questions, please feel free again to send me an email. Thank you for your time again, and best of luck with your job search and further opportunities.